Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since I discovered Spotify for Podcasters, I feel like I've been having a lot more connection with my listeners through the Q&As and polls. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Hi, I'm Father Daniel Duplantis, a Catholic priest, martial artist, and host of the Karate Priest podcast. Have you ever wondered what the church teaches about different topics? Are you a martial arts enthusiast or just someone who wants to learn more about martial arts? I'd like to invite you to join me and many guests on my podcast as we cover topics of faith, everyday living, and martial arts on the Karate Priest podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to season 3 of A Catholic's Perspective, the podcast about being a young Catholic surviving in a secular world. Today I have with me a good friend from Instagram, Keith from, is it Grassroots Catholic?
You know, I don't even know anymore. No, it's just Grassroots Catholic, but I'm not going to be upset if someone adds an S to it. Like, what, you add an S to Catholics? How dare you?
Yeah, you get discriminated for that, you know.
I do. Totally. Yeah.
No, I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in this, and what you do on Instagram?
Yeah. So on Instagram, like the goal with Instagram is to help millennials. So I'm like a geriatric millennial, so I'm kind of on the older end of the millennial stage, but to help us rediscover Catholic tradition. It's just so much rich tradition, obviously, that, you know, growing up, and this is from my experience, and I know a lot of other millennials have went through this, where it's just your parents did as best as they could. And then, you know, sending either to Catholic school and then getting that catechism wasn't as great. So, you know, not necessarily leaving the faith, but then coming back when we're, you know, getting married and then having families, you know, like obviously we have to baptize our children. And so then all these questions like, well, I don't agree with this back then. Is this? And then it's just kind of a rabbit hole. And so my whole thing is just to like help spread like all of the rich traditions that were lost. Like, this is our heritage. This is our birthright to know all of the things that we believe in as Catholics. And it's gotten muddled over the course of the last 60 years. So that's, in a nutshell, just me sharing, like, I guess, funny reels, funny videos, just to keep things not so stern and serious, which obviously there are items that we have to be serious and stern about, but you know,
they're really funny too. I love watching your reels, especially the one about the Spirit of Vatican II. Oh my gosh, that was so funny. I was laughing. I sent it to all my friends. I was like, look at this. It was so funny. I know you run a YouTube account, don't you, as well?
Yeah, you know, and that's kind of how I started this whole thing. Well, I mean, let's take a step back forward. So I'm an actor, and it wasn't until the COVID situation stuff happened that obviously all gigs just stopped, audition stopped, and then once things started picking back up, they were asking for just to audition to be vaccinated.
Ew.
And so I'm like I'm not gonna just, like, this is a side hustle, really. So I'm not going to like get vaccinated just to audition and maybe get a call back, if that. So I just decided, well, I'll do something creative. I have to have some creative outlet. Otherwise I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to drive my wife insane. So it started YouTube, and then I'm like, well, this Reels thing on Instagram is interesting. So that's kind of how it went down. So, yeah.
I know, because the Instagram reels are still pretty new. I know they're trying to become more like TikTok almost, in a sense. And so I just find it so funny that people had an outrage when Instagram started leaning more towards TikTok with the scrolling, and everyone was like, no, we just want to see pictures of our friends. It was so funny. But I think the reels really opened up a whole other level for us Catholic creators. Mainly because we can show people like we're not uptight, like we know how to have fun and lay back,
Totally.
and you have so many funny videos. So I definitely suggest everybody go check out his reels. I think they're really fun.
Thanks.
But yeah, what about you? Like, what are you into, and what was your life like, and were you always Catholic? Did you come back into it?
Yeah. So I was born, I'm a cradle Catholic, right? Had fantastic foundation by my parents. I honestly don't think I would be where I would be today if it wasn't for their just basic fundamentals of the Catholic faith. And it's funny because I went to Catholic school from grades 1 through 8, from 9th, 12th grade, and I still just wasn't really not knowledgeable about my faith. And so when I went to college, that's when things got a little crazy. I went to ASU. So that's all I really need to say about that. But that's when I got into more of the theater element. And so the funny thing is, like, I still went to mass. Like, that's one thing I remember, like, that was ingrained in my head, was that you never miss your Sunday obligation. And so I wasn't really living a lifestyle that should have been living as a Catholic, but I was still going to mass, which looking back wasn't, I mean, it was good, but then it wasn't good because I didn't really understand you're not supposed to receive Holy Communion if you're under mortal sin. So yeah, that was a rude awakening. But after that, I moved to Chicago, which I understand is kind of like where your home grounds are at. I lived in Chicago, and I'm so upset that I wasn't even aware of St. John Cantius. Is it Cantius or Cantius?
Yeah,
Cantius.
it's Cantius. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was super bummed to know about that. I missed out. I lived in Pilsen. Do you know where Pilsen is?
Not a clue.
Okay.
How far away is that from Cantius?
So I think, what is that? Kind of the northeast side of Chicago, right? It's like up north, or is it south?
Oh, I think it's in the north side.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the north side. It's not in the south side.
Okay.
Otherwise, we would all get shot.
Funny enough, you mentioned that. Not that I got shot at, but Pilsen is in the south side. But it has such a rich heritage. Like, it's originally a lot of the Polish and Germans lived there. And so all of, like, there's a church there, beautiful architecture. It's the only church, I think, in the world that was built without using a single nail.
What?
St. Paul's, I believe. Yeah.
Wow.
St. Paul's in Pilsen.
That's insane.
So yeah. So, like, I was homesick because I went to Chicago mainly to study at Second City. But I was homesick. And so I would walk to this parish, and that's kind of where I started, like, questioning things like, okay, I'm homesick. This is the one thing that brings me a little bit more comfort from home. Why, and so I just, like, go down a rabbit hole. And then I came back home, and that's when things started to change, started to question everything about my life. So yeah, it was, yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much it. I am now happily married with a 2-year-old daughter. So having her like see, because we now go to Institute of Christ the King for Mass. That's our parish now, the traditional Latin Mass.
Didn't they get shut down though?
In Chicago, for whatever reason, I don't know what happened in Chicago.
You guys go to Hammond, Indiana for it then?
No. So let me take a step back. I'm not in Chicago anymore. We're actually in Arizona.
Okay, makes more sense.
There's a Institute parish, and that's where we go to. And, like, my 2-year-old starts, like, praying the Pater Noster, like, just randomly during Mass. I'm like, this is cute. You got to stop. But just like crazy things that just trying to help build the domestic church so that it gets better in the world.
It's really important too. I mean, when you're surrounded by beauty, like, kids really pick up on that, because a lot of us, when we're surrounded by something, we start to act like it,
What, you don't think cafeteria is beautiful? Having Mass in a cafeteria?
Every single time
I like the stains.
Every time I walk into this one church, it sounds like a school cafeteria, because everybody's just talking so loud in the it's just, I'm like, go into the narthex. but most churches don't have those anymore. So I'm
That's
like,
true.
go into the cry room where adults belong.
And the funny thing is, most of the people are adults that are going into the cry rooms for whatever reason.
So funny. And I'm just like, you know what? If the church ain't crying, it's dying. Get rid of cry rooms. 2023 challenge. We'll see if that happens. Hashtag get rid of cry rooms.
That's right.
Speaking of heritage, today we're discussing basically like the Catholic roots of Halloween. And those types of things. I know you put out a couple Halloween videos and things like that. And so I'm really excited to get into this topic. I've talked about it a little bit on my YouTube channel in previous years, but I thought, I'm like, you know what? We're a few days away from Halloween when this episode gets released. So why not do an episode on Halloween? I also have a cat rubbing up against my legs. Hello, Molly. So I guess let's just like get into it. What was your own experience with Halloween growing up? Did your parents celebrate it, not celebrate it? What did you guys do?
So kind of had the best of both worlds, I guess you could say. So I would dress up and go door to door trick-or-treating. But then, because I went to Catholic school, we celebrated All Saints Day. So I dressed up as saints or as a saint, right? So like I said, I got the best of both worlds, so to speak. But I honestly, like, I don't remember really knowing like, oh, there's 3 different days associated with like Hallowtide. Like that just wasn't ever a thing that I learned. And so it was just like Halloween and All Saints Day.
I got you. Yeah, I know what you mean. We did something similar where basically when I was younger, my mom used to make us costumes. So I was Our Lady one year and my sister was our Saint Rose of Lima, who ended up being my confirmation saint, actually. Nice. And so we would do that while our friends like dressed up as like Disney characters and stuff like that. Eventually, when I was like 12, she broke and she got me an Ahsoka costume because I was like, I want to be Ahsoka from Star Wars. It was it's not my brightest moment, but we definitely did a lot of the same things. Like I definitely knew the 3 days. Like I knew it was All Hallows Eve, and then I knew there was All Saints Day and All Souls Day. I actually switched those 2, right? But it was one of those things where like I really looked forward to it because it was my most favorite holiday, but there's so many Catholics today that just think it's automatically demonic. And I'm just like, that's what the devil wants you to think. Like that's literally what he wants you to think, because it's not unless you make it, you know? Yeah. No day can specifically be demonic unless you make it demonic. Right. And so I guess the first question we can get into is like, how is Halloween Catholic?
In the name right off the bat. So the name Halloween is Catholic. So if we break it down, hallow means to make one holy. Een is, well, it derives from shortening the word evening. So it's so like E apostrophe E-N, right? So, you know, those who are, you know, God's holy ones or made God's holy one are his hallowed ones. So also known as saints. Right. So that becomes like the Eve of All Hallows or the Eve of All Saints. So that's like in the breaking of down the word, it's all Catholic. Right. So right there, it's you know, before you dive into any of it, it's a Catholic word and it's a holiday.
Americanizing everything, making it Halloween instead of All Hallows Eve.
Ruined it. Yeah, totally ruined it.
We ruin a lot of things.
Right. So, I mean, it depends on how deep you want to go, because it's funny, like the history of Halloween was obviously never taught in school, nor I don't remember it being taught in my Catholic school or catechism, like, and really does it need to be, because you have the Hallowtide, right? But it's interesting, unless like you go back to Salem and they're just like, oh, witches and things like that, and that's the Halloween kind of history you get the pagan history. You don't get the Catholic Church trying to make it, you know, into a Catholic history. You know, you always get the pagan side of things, and people are like, oh, it's demonic, it's pagan, it's this and that, and I'm like, no, not originally. No. And it's, you know, Catholics, we take what's unholy and then we sanctify it. So yeah, the Druids and the Celtics were doing their weird thing, the weird pagan stuff. And we're like, how about we do this instead? Because this is better for you. So, you know, there's still elements of like the pagan stuff, like, because it's all based on their harvesting and their harvest period. So like you have the carving of the pumpkins, like that's obviously not Catholic. But all the spooky stuff, that's Catholic.
It is.
You
I mean,
know?
have you seen Poland like on All Souls Day? Like the graveyards are just
No,
lit up with these beautiful soul candles. They're
no
like
kidding.
red and orange and all the graveyards are covered in it because they take All
Wow.
Souls Day so like seriously. Whereas here I'm like, when was the last time anyone visited their dead grandparents or, prayed for their
Right?
dead grandparents?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Totally.
Americanization just like kind of ruined a lot of things. I mean,
Mm,
especially even now in 2022, there's been so much um satanic things that have been happening in the world and it's not hidden anymore. It's actually
no.
blatantly out there. And so people think Halloween is automatically satanic and I'm just
Hmm.
like, but why? Like you only think that way because the world makes you think that, you know? But if you were to actually go deeper down into history and
Hmm.
try to uncover like, oh, what are the bare bones and where did it come from? And
Hmm.
I think it started the Catholic tradition of All Hallowtide started in the 7th century, if I'm correct.
That
I'm
sounds
not sure.
about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And
Um, yeah.
All Hallows Eve, it's just one of those things that I'm like, obviously as Catholics, we don't believe that Satan has more power than God or anything like that.
No.
But I personally love spooky stuff, you know? I,
Yeah.
I don't know who doesn't, but maybe a baby, but
Yeah, I guess
but
baby toddler. Huh?
I've always wondered, like, why do people think Halloween is satanic besides the world telling them? Is it because of the spooky decorations out? Is it because they're taught in school about witches and things? Like, why?
I think it ultimately comes from anti-Catholic rhetoricism.
Mm,
So you have Jack Chick. I don't know if you're familiar with Jack Chick.
no.
So it's funny because you Google him and he's like an American cartoonist, and it's like, okay, he was not just an American cartoonist; he was kind of an awful person, anti-Catholic, because he would
Oof.
make these cartoons. I can't remember if I don't think he's Baptist or evangelical. I can't remember. He's very anti-Catholic, and so he'd create these cartoons, these stories, and a lot of them had to do with against the Catholic beliefs about the Eucharist, and then he'd also make some about Halloween because obviously Halloween is a Catholic holiday
Right.
that
Yeah.
about the saints, believing in the saints, and then believing in the souls and All Souls Day, praying for them, and so he then implemented stories about they're satanic, Catholics are satanic, which is crazy, but they're satanic, and so there's all these witches and all these satanic rituals, and so a lot of these things that he drew, I don't know how, like, how even some Catholics believe this to this day. They're just like all this, like, oh, it's the Sam Hines birthday, or it's like, no, not that. That's just something that some dude who makes doodles made up.
Right. Well,
Um,
also a lot of
yeah,
people will be like, "Oh, pumpkin carving isn't Catholic and things like that." I'm like, "Okay, true. It didn't originate from
yeah,
Catholicism, but here's the thing. We do still have a Christmas tree too, don't we? People don't know
right,
the pagan origins of the Christmas tree, and yet we still
yeah,
have that.
that's right,
Jesus goes under the
100%.
Christmas tree. We just Catholify everything, okay?
And then you can even make carve icons into pumpkins. So once again,
I literally did that last
sanctified.
year. I painted it. I'm not
Oh
a good
yeah,
carver because I have weak wrists, so I'm like stabbing
yeah,
the pumpkin. But you know what? It works. And I just find it.
yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just about to say painting's probably a little bit better to do on the pumpkin because, like you said, it's just carving. It just you have those templates and you try like, oh, this is gonna be awesome, and then nobody can tell what you carved.
No, it's so true. And I guess just like basically, in the United States, I don't know if you're familiar with like the Puritans,
Mm,
the people there. They completely like banned Halloween,
mm,
without hesitation at all, which I'm like, all right, like, well, it's the Puritans, right? But like, I'm just saying that we can really keep the tradition of All Souls Day, All Hallows Eve, Hallowtide in general alive,
mm, yeah,
because I mean, back in the day, back in Germany and stuff like that,
yeah,
people used to make, little cakes on Halloween and give it out to kids,
yeah,
and kids would go house to house begging for these
yeah,
sweetcakes, and that's just where we get trick-or-treating from.
right.
Um, do I want to go up to a stranger's house, knock on their door, and say trick or treat 10,000 times? I will for candy.
Yeah.
Do I want to wear a giraffe costume? Yes, all day, every day, no question asked. But I think it's interesting because, obviously we're not superstitious as Catholics.
No.
I always love that quote from The
The
Office.
little stitches.
Yeah, I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious. I just find that so funny. But the Catechism of the Catholic Church specifically says that, like, obviously we are not superstitious.
Right.
But the thing is people are kind of superstitious about Halloween. And I'm like, I don't know where that stems from, really. I mean, it could be all the ghosts and the goblins, and they think that the veil of souls is thinner on that day, and and things, but superstition, I mean, it's literally condemned in the Bible as well, if I'm
Yeah.
correct. It's just interesting to see how one day can affect people so badly that they're just like, shut the shades, lock the doors, don't let anyone in. Like, the devils are roaming free. And I'm like, God is bigger than all of that.
Yeah. Come
It's
on.
just interesting to me.
Yeah. It it is interesting how, and I think it might come to just poor catechesis.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of cultural Catholics out there who, maybe they go to mass every Sunday,
Maybe they don't.
maybe
And
they
I
don't. Yeah.
and it's interesting because it's like people associate Halloween with like superstition, witchcraft, and all
Hmm.
those things. And obviously we don't condone that. The Catechism
Right.
of the Catholic Church actually says all practices of magic or sorcery by which one attempts to tame occult powers so as to
Hmm.
place them at one's service and have a supernatural power over others, even if this were for the sake of restoring their health, is gravely contrary to the virtue of religion. And that's 2117 from the Catechism. And so I I really think these days we need to celebrate Halloween even more Catholic now than ever. Like, we need to
Yeah.
reclaim a lot of these secular holidays like Easter and
Yes.
Christmas. And there's a lot of
Totally.
people that are just willing to just hand it over to the world and be like, all right, that's it. My job's done. I'm not doing it. It's just so weird. But I think it's important that we celebrate Halloween and not forget about, God and the saints. Um, so I guess, how can we best celebrate Hallowtide as Catholics, do you think?
Um, I feel like, yeah, we should totally, well, I feel like as Catholics, modern day Catholics, and maybe I'm not trying to generalize a group of people here, but we don't feast enough. So I think the fact that we have 3 days, 3 Hallowtide days, we should totally feast up, meaning that we obviously celebrate the Catholic way, but also implementing it into the secular version of Halloween. I sometimes joke about teaching my 2-year-old daughter to, after receiving candy, saying something about, oh, I'll pray for the souls of your loved ones.
Aw,
But that probably would not, I'd probably be banned from the neighborhood if I did that, but it'd be
worth a
worth it.
shot.
Uh, but yeah, just like, a lot of the costumes for All Saints Day could also be implemented into Halloween. Like,
So true.
having St. John the Baptist having like your head off to the side, like on a plate, like that's pretty scary, spooky. Could be good
Love
for
that.
Halloween. Starts conversations. I don't know. Just
It
some ideas.
No, it's true. And I also think, like, in general, I think hosting all Hollow Tide parties is like
Hmm.
so fun. My best friend is actually
Yeah.
throwing one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I'm like, am I gonna go as Saint Rose of Lima, or am I gonna go as like Saint Lucy with my eyes gouged out? Who knows?
That
Nobody knows.
See, that could be pretty creative. You get really creative with that one.
See,
Pretty much.
I love doing creative stuff. So what are you guys going as this Halloween this year?
Um, I'm trying to think. I know for Halloween, we're doing like the Grinch theme with my
Ooh,
niece and nephew.
that's gonna
So
be so fun.
yeah. So still trying to think of what we could do, obviously for All Saints Day. Um, Now, I mean, just because last year there wasn't much of a Halloween per se. Now this year, obviously, it's Halloween's back.
Right.
So I don't know. It's still up in the air of kind of like what saintly figure to choose for her that she could be. So
I love
yeah,
it. I mean, what
yeah.
would you say to people who are like on the fence about Halloween, especially Catholics, you know? Like, what do we say to them to be like, no, it's okay to celebrate Halloween, but do it the Catholic way, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I mean, it's, especially if they're families, like if you don't feel comfortable celebrating Halloween, well, just know you're not giving into like satanic stuff, but you like no one's forcing you, like you have to go trick or treating. Like if you don't want to, don't do it.
Right.
But like at least embrace the Catholic version of All Hallows Eve, Saints Day, obviously, and then All Souls Day. So
It's true.
yeah.
I mean, I always loved Memento Mori, Remember Your Death. Or
Yeah, got my shirt.
oh,
My Maury
there you
shirt.
go. You're wearing there you go. I have a
There you
Memento
go.
Mori rosary.
Oh,
And
nice.
I love it because it's so true. Like our time here is temporary and there's so many
Mm,
souls in purgatory that need our prayers. And, and it's just something where it's like we focus so much on the here and now when in reality, um, there won't be a here and now for
mm-mm,
forever. So it's just interesting to me. That's my favorite thing about Halloween is doing the Memento Mori.
mm,
I don't know. I don't want to say like photo shoots, but like remembrance.
yeah.
I go to the graveyard and I pray the rosary, and I think there's also indulgences you can get on All Souls Day
Yes. I'm
for
fairly
that
certain you're
too.
right on that. Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And there are so many things you can do with Halloween. You can have parties, you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to go trick-or-treating, like you said. You could just have a party at your own
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
Um, dress up as a saint. I don't know what I'm going as this year to my friend's birthday party, like I said, or birthday party, Halloween party. But like I'm
Ahsoka. I'm just kidding.
honestly, I might. I'll pull out my old costume because I can't even fit it anymore. But it's just interesting to me how, especially on like Twitter and YouTube and everything, people just, they'll get their pants in a knot because of, I mentioned Halloween and they're like, Halloween's not Catholic. And I'm like,
Mm,
you want to maybe rethink that? Do you know about Halloween and its
right.
origins? Um, I always say that Google's free, but people never seem to actually believe me. And I'm just like, you know what? I don't know. I feel like it's a really great time, especially if you have kids, to sit down with your kids and talk. Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
tell them like scary stories, but you can
No.
tell them stories about like the saints and like maybe
Oh
some
yeah.
martyrs or something if they're old enough for that. I just I love books like that. And as a kid,
Mm.
my mom used to read us a lot of what is it, the Brothers Grimm or whatever.
Mm.
And so we
Yeah.
were raised on like
Classics.
really old literature and the Snowdrop and stuff like that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, those types of audiobooks and stuff, my sister and I love during Halloween.
That's awesome.
We were raised a
Yeah.
little different.
And that's in a good way too, sounds like. So
Yeah. I mean, if we were traumatized by it, that'd be different. But like I sometimes still listen to them because it's like nostalgic and I'm like,
oh yeah, totally.
but
It's a
it's
tradition that you have now for yourself or whenever,
yeah, I think
Mhm.
also like a tradition we do every now and then, at least I do it, is like I think it's like on All Hallows Eve or whatever, we turn on all
Mhm.
the lights and we only have candlelight.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
I mean,
That's really
accident
cool.
prone me, I don't see things, but it's worth it's worth it for the aesthetic. One of my friends
uh
and I, we really want to do that trend. I don't know if you've seen the ghost trend on Instagram where your friends and you dress up in like ghost sheets and you put glasses on and you like just stand and do a photo shoot.
oh yeah. I have seen that. Yeah.
I
It's
feel like
funny.
that'd be so funny to do. I'm like, technically it's not Catholic, so it'd probably just go on my private account, but I think that would be so funny when I get older. I'm like, look, kids, look what mom did.
Yeah, right.
Stood in woods with a sheet on her head for absolutely no reason. Oh gosh, yeah, there's just so many ways to celebrate Halloween in the Catholic way. And I
Yeah,
um I don't know if you
totally.
remember, but Heather from A Catholic Mom's
Hmm.
Life. Yeah, she's awesome. She actually just put out
Yeah.
a video about Halloween and stuff. And she was
Hmm.
basically saying the same thing. Like you can basically Catholify any holiday.
Yeah.
And that's what we did back in the 7th or 8th century. What was it, Pope Leo the Third or something? He saw what the pagans were doing and
Mm.
he was like, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this instead. Um And then we stuck with that, but I guess a lot of people, I mean, with how much tradition we've lost in the last few years, it's been, I don't know,
Yeah,
it's been weird.
that's for sure.
Most kids aren't being taught about the Holocaust anymore. They're not being taught about 9/11. They're not. Yeah.
What? Are you
Hmm.
kidding me? That's
Yeah.
insane.
But they are taught about slavery
Oh,
still.
of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But like the kids, some of the kids that like I'll ask them questions, I babysit some girls, and when I'm at the
Hmm.
playground, like some of these kids will just be talking to me and stuff, and I'm just like, so you know how like the country came to be founded or whatever. And these are like probably like sixth grade kids, and they're like, what? And I'm like, it was founded on God and liberty. And they were just like, not everyone believes in God. So, and I'm like, you know what? Not that I
That's
want
not
to
what even
slap,
was in question. Or just say that's literally what they did. That's
not that I want to slap a sixth grader, but.
very tempting when they're talking like that. That's for
Mm.
sure.
And I'm like, so what do you guys learn in thing? And they're just like, well, like being white isn't that great because we enslaved people. And I'm like, and I asked them, I'm like, did you yourself own a slave? And they're like, no. And I'm like,
Okay.
okay, Dan, so you are not responsible for what your ancestors' actions were.
Oh,
It's just insane
yeah.
to me. I don't know. And we're losing so much history these days, and it just breaks my heart because I'm like, these kids have no
Well,
idea.
yeah. It's pushed me and my wife to just like, okay, we're going to homeschool because you can't control what
Art.
teachers are doing. You can't control what other students may show to your
Mhm.
child. And that goes with Catholic school too, because I experienced that.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you combat that? And I guess eventually it's like, well, this is my choice. Either send them to a Catholic school and
Mm-hmm.
or either go into a co-op or just homeschool your own self. I don't know.
It's so true. I mean, I was homeschooled and like
Yeah.
I was still bullied a lot in high school and stuff,
Hmm.
but yeah, you can't really avoid that. But
Yeah.
there was definitely a difference because I don't know, the public school kids I was around, they just seemed not that they weren't mature for their age, but
Hmm.
they it seemed like they already went through so much trauma at like such a young
Mm.
age from like bullying and like
No.
school and being around
Yeah.
their same peers and not having a bunch of like options and age groups. And
Mm.
it just was always interesting to me because I was raised around all age groups, I was raised around
Hmm.
grandparents, adults, babies, toddlers, kids my
Hmm.
age. I just viewed everyone as being like, oh, they're all human. But
Mm.
now it's weird because we're all segregated into different ages. So it's weird if a 8-year-old wants to hang out with like a 60-year-old who's their grandpa or something because they're
Yeah.
just like, nah, grandpa's boring. Like, I don't know. That's weird to me.
That is weird.
And
Yeah.
not to mention, like, basically, when you put your kid on school property, you're basically like giving them up to the government.
Yeah.
They're
You're
just like,
you're
oh,
literally
great,
handing it
they're
over.
ours now.
Yeah. And it didn't used to be like that. Like it never used to be like that until I
Mhm.
don't even know when this whole thing, the sliding the agenda into the students' heads there. But like I don't remember any of that. Like I didn't
Yeah.
feel like I was brainwashed. Granted, my theology is a little iffy because just I don't know the teaching wasn't that great, but it wasn't like I learned something completely different that was like incorrect misinformation.
Right.
But now today it's like you can't even depend on that or having teachers that are going to be doing things correctly. So
It's actually ridiculous how many times um like I've seen like the like teachers like tweet things where they're just like,
mm,
I teach like this and this in my school, and I'm like, you know what, 20 even 10 years ago you would have been thrown in jail for those
yeah,
things, like teaching sex ed to like 2-year-olds, like what, or what is
mm,
it, second graders or something. It's just
yeah,
ridiculous. And I'm like, you know what? If you're going to homeschool, now's the time because it's not going to get much better from this point on. There's going to be eventually
yeah,
it's going to reach, I feel like eventually it's going to reach its height, and then it's going to start coming back down. People are going to come back to their senses.
Mhm.
But as of right now, the best thing you can do for your kid is protect them from these things,
Yep.
teach them how to deal with it properly, because it's
Right.
been like psychologically proven that if you hear something first from somebody, that is what you believe. And if you hear a second opinion, you don't believe them as much. So if you don't teach your kid about, abortion and all these things, and the
Yeah.
world does, they're probably not going to take you as seriously. Also, why would they? They don't spend that much time with you. They're with
Yeah.
strangers 8 hours a day, and they probably respect their teachers more than they respect you. So
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see like what is the breaking point where maybe just not Catholics, but like people that aren't religious are like, well, one of us, the significant other is going to have to stay at home.
mm-hmm.
Like that in itself is such a sacrifice.
Right.
Like it never used to be like that, obviously, however many years ago, many, many years ago. But it's totally worth the sacrifice,
It is.
Yeah.
We have the 500-year cycle, it's called. Like,
Mm-hmm.
good people make spoiled brats
That's right.
make
Yeah.
hard times
Right.
make good people, and then it just keeps going.
Where are
And
we on that? How
I feel
close are we
like
to the
I feel like we're on the spoiled brats make hard times.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's a lot of spoiled brats out there.
Oh my gosh, it's actually ridiculous too. And I mean, I'm all for sheltering people to a certain extent, but I also think some bullying is kind of healthy. When it comes to just like figuring out, okay, this is socially acceptable and this is
Right.
not.
Yes, definitely. That's how kids understand like what not to do with other kids, is that they kind of get put in their place in a way. So yeah, so there is some good bullying, I guess you'd call it that. But yeah, I like sheltering. I feel like being a filter is also helpful because obviously you're protecting them from all the weird stuff that they don't need to know about.
Right.
But they're also going to be walking down the street and seeing a man wearing a dress, and they're going to have questions.
Mm-hmm.
So like you have to be the filter, like telling them the truth, but not giving them all the details, but just, letting them know, what that is and why someone would do that and why we don't do that.
Right.
As
But
opposed to like,
go ahead.
go ahead. No, go.
I was going to say, but like, thank God you're with your child when that happens, because then you're able to explain it to them. If they're with them by themselves or with friends, their friends are like, oh, are you a bigot or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
At least you're the one that is able to tell them first.
Yep. Exactly.
It's just ridiculous. But I think nowadays kids are really under attack. And, Our Lady of Fatima told us that Satan would go after the family, and she's been doing a pretty good, he's been doing a good job since the sexual revolution and the toxic feminist movement. And I don't know where we're going to go from here, but it's like, I just feel for these poor kids that are sucked into something they didn't ask to be sucked into.
It's a whole different playing field out there for kids these days. That's for sure. Yeah.
I mean, even growing up, like, I knew stuff was bad. I was 2 when 9/11 happened. I knew things were happening. Right. But yeah, crazy, right? And I'm 23 now.
I feel old. I feel really
I'm
old. I mean, I have gray hair now, so
I have 4 gray
didn't
hairs.
get away. Kidding me? Look at this thing. Okay. So yeah, one thing I love about my beard is how unsymmetrical it is. Like nothing here, and then it's just like a gray streak right there.
Oh my gosh.
It looks like I just drank a bottle of milk and just didn't clean up after myself on just one side of my mouth. But
it's sometimes fashionable to have like a streak of something in your hair, Yeah,
actually, you're right. Yeah, okay. I'll take that.
Bring back 2008 hairstyles. The feathers in the hair and stuff. Oh my gosh. If I'm know what? I have a grudge against kids these days, though, that they don't go through an awkward phase.
Yeah.
They literally skip the blue eyeshadow, braces, weird eye color thing. Like they skip all the bad haircuts, weird makeup, heavy eyeliner. They go straight to Instagram model. Like overnight. There's so many kids where I'm like, You're literally 8. You should not be wearing a choker, ripped jeans, and a crop top.
Yeah, where are the parents? Like, come on. Like,
Unless the parents are the ones that are like, oh, pose, baby.
Yeah, that's probably the case. Like, that's probably the case.
It's so sad.
But yeah.
Though.
Yeah, there's like probably some mix between the two ends. Like, there were awkward phases that, pictures were taken and posted on Facebook, and now they're like available for everybody to see. So everybody in that general age group, probably millennials, I would assume, because we had some access to the internet back when we were young, but not MySpace, AOL chat rooms, AIM. Yeah.
Throwback.
Good old times. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's just been crazy, and I feel really bad for these kids, but you know what? Now that we've kind of gotten over the hump that is COVID, hopefully there's some normalcy coming back into their everyday lives. I mean, hopefully they can go trick-or-treating again. They can start having Halloween parties, stuff like that. But I just find it really interesting that, now every single time Halloween kind of rolls around this time of year, people are always in my comments just being like, Halloween isn't Catholic. I don't see how Halloween and Catholicism goes hand in hand. And there are some kids, like when I was teaching religious ed, who were not allowed to celebrate Halloween at all. And I'm like, you guys are missing out on some great indulgences and, just spiritual fun, feast days, and I'm just sad that the world ruins things for us Catholics.
Yeah, and like we don't go trick-or-treating because we're afraid of some of the kids that are gonna be wearing some gruesome costumes. And then the next day you go to Target and you see some things that you can never unsee. It's like the world is crazy enough as it is. At least this is make believe, and you can, cover your kids' eyes or just not go out or just stay and do like a trunk or treat,
Oh, those are fun. Sometimes churches have those.
Yeah.
Or organize one yourself,
Yeah. Totally.
Honestly, I think kids really benefit from it. And it's better to tell them about the Catholic side of things than to tell them to be afraid of something, because when they get older, I think they take more of an interest in it. And if you don't know the Catholic roots of something, they might get into some pretty demonic stuff.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Speaking from experience. But yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on, though. I really appreciate you coming on. Where can my listeners find you?
Well, Instagram is like my home base, so to speak, but I'm trying to diversify, if you will. So I'm not having all my eggs in one basket. I'm on TikTok, but I literally just post and I don't like.
Same.
I just post that's it. I step away. That's right, because
I got permanently banned.
Apparently.
Anyway, sorry. I'm sorry. You continue. Yes.
No, it's okay. YouTube. What else? That's pretty much the main three: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, MySpace.
Okay. And it's
MySpace.
Catholic, grassroots Catholic, right?
Grassroot Catholic. Yeah.
Excommunicate.
Stop trying to add the S. Stop trying to add the S.
S is not going to happen. No, I love it.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Ambrose. Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully have you back on the podcast sometime soon.
Love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. Hopefully this was helpful for anyone who's Catholic and was hesitant about Halloween. And of course, we got into like some awesome other, conversations about school and homeschooling and all that fun stuff. So definitely tune in for next episode. But with all of that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to A Catholic's Perspective with me, The Religious Hippie. Make sure to visit my official website at thereligioushippie.com, and while you're there, be sure to sign up for my newsletter to keep up to date with my latest news and offerings. You can also find me on virtually any social media site as The Religious Hippie. Thanks for listening.
A quest is a search for something. And every week, the Quest podcast will show you how we know what we know through interviews with people that have incredible stories of dedication and perseverance. I'm your host, Todd Fisher. Join me in this thought-provoking and inspiring podcast of discovery. Find us anywhere you listen to podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Selling a little or a lot? Do your thing however you cha-ching with Shopify, the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/offer23.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode. This podcast is produced by Todd Fisher and Anthony Smith and is distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions stated in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure and visit the official website for Metacortex Publishing at metacortexpublishing.com or find us on social media for other unique content.